Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
Hey everybody, welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast. Today we are going on a trip.
Yes, we're taking a weekend trip to Charleston, South Carolina. And we've actually been to Charleston once before this trip. And we really enjoyed it so much, in fact, that we decided to make it a priority to return before we end our time down in the southern U.S., down in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to take our portable recorder down with us and just capture some of the moments in Charleston.
And we're going to start off right after we arrived in Charleston. We parked our car, checked out our Airbnb quickly, and then scurried over to King Street to meet some people for dinner.
Yeah, so we'll check in there. Hello from Charleston, South Carolina. Walking down the street in downtown after checking into a very strange Airbnb. What was that experience like for you, Ryan?
It was good. I think
it was good?
So you look at the building from the outside, and we just booked the cheapest Airbnb we could find in Charleston.
In a good location.
Yeah. So the building looks kind of like a communist apartment building from the outside.
Or a crack house.
Yeah. Well, more communist from the outside, crack house on the inside.
Yeah, that's fair. So you walk in, there's cigarette butts everywhere, kind of stains on the floor. Elevator kind of smells like somebody peed in there. Apartment's nice, though.
Yeah, the elevator has a distinct smell of urine. But then the other weird thing that I didn't notice until we'd been in the apartment for like 20 minutes was that there's a Christmas tree, and then the lighting is actually supplied by Christmas lights that are hanging on the ceiling.
So what did you decide it was? Communist on the outside,
crack house on the inside, and
Christmas in the apartment.
Yeah.
And so what is our intention of this podcast episode?
So it's just to, I don't know, we haven't figured it out yet, to be honest with you, but to talk about Charleston and how magical it is to live here.
Yeah.
Or be here. We're not living here, of course, but we're hopefully going to be talking to some people who do live here.
I thought you were going to say we're hopefully going to be living here. I was like, we're not hopefully living here. Charleston we've been once before, and Charleston is a really beautiful, old city located on the coast of the United States, South Carolina specifically. And the houses are, quite old and colorful and cool, which is something that, we're not used to back in Canada. So that's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah. It's tons of young people. I was going to say lots, but there's tons. Lots of cool restaurants. Seems like a lot happening. Fun place to be. It's kind of like a hipster city.
Good thing I brought my Converse.
/ tourist city. Yeah, Amanda's decked out.
So we'll check in a little bit later.
So for anyone who hasn't been to Charleston, which I imagine is most of you listeners.
Maybe, except our local Charlestonians.
Shut up. It is a very beautiful city. The first time we were there, we stayed in Mount Pleasant, which is kind of the newer, more suburban area of the city. But this time we booked the cheapest Airbnb we could find right downtown, really focused on location. And so when you're downtown Charleston, there's lots of beautiful old houses, all sorts of colors, and the streets are lined with palm trees. And you can kind of get the smell of the ocean, right?
Yeah, a little bit amongst the sort of college scents that are around there.
College scents? What are those?
Beer, alcohol.
Cannabis.
Yeah, those sorts of scents are also present in
that's one of the really cool things about Charleston, is this old historic neighborhood downtown, but then there's also the campus of the College of Charleston. So the weekend we were there, I don't know if there's something weird happening. But
there was a formal for a fraternity.
Yeah, I don't know if there was some bigger thing happening.
I mean, I think that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, because as we were walking around, there's a lot of shenanigans, young people, drunk.
Dressed up all fancy, lots of parties happening. But the city was really alive, which is something that I really like about Charleston. And it's old in a similar way to like Savannah, Georgia, or I'm trying to think of another old city. I was going to say New Orleans, but New Orleans is way more bumping than Charleston. But it's
Boston. I mean, it's it's an eastern port city, so one of the earlier places to get settled and to get developed. I know there's a lot of Civil War history there, and
yeah, I think that's where the first Civil War battle was fought. So definitely,
I don't know if that's true.
I'm pretty sure it is. But anyways, that's what I think my knowledge is from Gone with the Wind, at least.
Our historical advisor to the show, Margaret Mitchell.
Rest in peace. Anyways, so our first night in Charleston, we made our way down to King Street, which is sort of the biggest main street there, and definitely the place that I would recommend if anyone is planning to visit Charleston, to find a restaurant, a bar, a cocktail bar, a nightclub, a shop. It's basically got everything that you could want on one major street. And so we headed there to meet up with some friends.
Yeah, we went to a burger bar called
Home minus the E. Not sure the pronunciation. It was delicious though.
Yeah, it had an O with a line on the top.
Yeah, which to me signifies a different language, but I'm not sure which language. And it also wasn't like Asian style or anything. It was just a burger place. A good burger place at that.
Yeah, freaking delicious.
Freaking awesome.
And then we went for drinks after at a cocktail bar and just really spent the first evening there meeting up with some of our friends in town. Went back to our slightly sketchy Airbnb, slept the night, and then woke up with a bit of a roadblock to our plans for Saturday morning.
You could say that. What are we doing right now?
We're sitting outside our apartment building waiting for a tow truck driver to come and remove the boot from Amanda's car.
Yes. And how did that happen?
Well, I'm assuming they just came and put it on.
I meant more like we're staying at this Airbnb and they're like, yeah, it's fine. Just park there. Like, we'll give you a pass. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, it's fine. They're like, yeah, it's fine. And then we go to put the pass in the car this morning. And sure enough, they've put the boot on my car. So I felt really angry. And now I feel a little bit more calm about it. Oh, I think our guy's here.
And we were sitting there on the curb outside of our apartment building. And right behind our car, there's a little small boot on the back of Amanda's car. And this guy pulls up in this Nissan truck, rap music blaring. The truck's kind of a bit of a piece of shit.
Was it though? It was kind of like this souped up SUV thing.
No, it was like this ghetto Nissan truck.
Oh, wow.
It's just had like really loud music. Big black dude gets out, comes over. So he's like, I don't know. We start talking about the boot, and we had called the woman who was hosting us at Airbnb, and she's like, oh, don't worry about this. I got this. Like, they won't make you pay because I'll tell them I live here. It's not going to be an issue, whatever. So eventually we have this awkward kind of minute and a half where we're like, oh, yeah, sorry, there's someone coming down to like negotiate on our behalf. And he's like, you can't negotiate.
Yeah, like he's like, I can't take it off till I get the payment. And I was like, oh, shit. Like $50. It's not a huge amount, but it's like, you know, a night's accommodation, essentially. Like, it would have kind of put us over budget for the weekend, so not really ideal. And so the lady comes down, and she's like, oh, I live in this apartment number. And he's like, well, you had to call this other number and say that you had guests staying with you. And she's like, oh, but I did. And he's like, well, no, you didn't, because this car wasn't on the list. Otherwise, the boot wouldn't have gotten on the car. And they kind of go back and forth like this for a while. They both try to call the property manager of this apartment building to get proof that this woman did call when he's saying she didn't. And Ryan and I are kind of just like literally standing in the middle of them. And eventually it gets to a point where I was like, well, like, what if I just pay? And the lady looks at me and she's like, you're not paying for this, which was really nice of her, but it was really awkward.
Yeah, it was kind of like standing there as, I don't know, maybe like your parents are fighting and we're like, what do we do?
It was totally like that. Like as if we were the children, like witnessing something that we shouldn't have been witnessing that was kind of about us.
Yeah. And it's funny watching this dance kind of the host being like, oh no, I called, like this should be free. And then when she was like agreed to pay, she's like, oh, it used to be $35. I'm just going to pay $35. She's like, oh, I want to pay in check. And he's like, oh, we don't take check. And he's like, and just kind of back and forth, dance of negotiation.
Yeah, at one point she's like, oh, this company's like not even legitimate. Like they just scam people around town. And then she went,
a bunch of frauds.
Then she went upstairs to get the cash and he's like, we're obviously legitimate or we couldn't have done this. And I was like, okay, I just don't want to be a part of this. Just take the boot off my car.
Yeah. And it was kind of like an unexpected kind of uncomfortable experience. But one of the things that kept coming up for us, like staying in a place that wasn't remarkably nice and having this like boot experience, was kind of like reminded us of like kind of the adventure of traveling, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And people don't really put the boot on your vehicle in Canada, so I feel like it was a very quintessential.
They call it the boot.
Quintessential American experience. So, you know, since I didn't have to pay for it in the end, I guess I'm kind of grateful for that.
Put it in the scrapbook. Yeah, and then after that, we a quick wander over to the Charleston Farmers Market on Saturday morning.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, I felt like the entire city was there. It was just a massive farmers market, really good like community feel. I love farmers markets, so I was stoked on being there.
Yeah, and Charleston's like very much the city where you would expect to find a large farmers market.
Yeah, for sure. And then we checked back in on our way over to Sullivans Island to meet some friends for lunch.
So, as we were giving our morning update, we didn't do anything. A guy pulled up to negotiate the removal of the boot from Amanda's car. So we have reclaimed our car, and now we're driving over the fancy Charleston Bridge, I don't know what it's actually called, on our way out to the beach at Sullivans Island.
And so, kind of the point of this episode, I think, is to sort of talk about, like, I guess, like, life in Charleston, life in South Carolina. And it's interesting being from Canada and having, like, no comprehension of the Carolinas. Like, I just kind of imagine them as these, like, southern, boring places, kind of, like, full of small towns. And Charleston's actually so cool.
Yeah,
stereotype, but I'm just getting honest.
I didn't know anything really about... I never really considered the Carolinas before.
Do you know what
other than, like, why is there a Carolina Hurricanes hockey team?
Yeah.
Or, like, why is that there? And why are they winning the Stanley Cup? That's absurd. Anyways, but yeah, Charleston's a spectacular city. And after visiting the fall, I think we both talked about how it'd be a really nice city to spend a bit of time in the future.
Yeah, I would definitely spend some time here. So my only knowledge of the Carolinas was actually from The Bachelor. One of the bachelorettes a couple years ago was from Charlotte, North Carolina. And I felt like she was so, like, Southern Belle, like, I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But that was my only knowledge about the Carolinas prior to getting out to Georgia. So we drove over the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge, and you continue driving through Mount Pleasant area, and you continue driving until the road gets a little bit smaller and the land surrounding gets a little bit more marshy, more full of weeds. You can see some water in the distance, and you continue driving until you get to Sullivans Island, and it's sort of a patch of land in marshy ocean water.
And I don't know if I'd say marshy ocean water.
It's a little bit like marshy.
Well, so on the one side, the land side of Sullivans Island, maybe a little bit. But then on the other side, it's just wide open ocean.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good description. And when you arrive there, there's houses that are perched up. So because the water comes in quite a bit, they're raised off. So there's like a lot of stilts that you can see. And basically just houses lining the entire beach. And then on the other side of the houses is a street lined with restaurants and shops and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it seems like it must be crazy busy in the summer.
Yeah, we've been in the fall and now in the spring as well. And it was busy both times, like lots of really busy restaurants. The place that we went for lunch called Homegrown Barbecue. Home Team Barbecue, thank you, was really busy the entire time we were there. It was busy as we walked back to the car a couple hours later. So I can imagine it's just crazy bumping with tourists in the summer.
Yeah, definitely.
And so while we were on Sullivans Island, we met up with a couple friends and we asked them what it's like to be a local Charlestonian and what they love about, I confirm that's the word, and what they love about living in Charleston.
Yeah, so we talked to two guys who, if you've been listening to the podcast, work for Praxis, which is the education company that Isaac Morehouse from episode number 93.
Episode 91, you mean? Isaac Morehouse on Traveling with the Family?
Yeah, episode 91.
Yeah, go check it out.
Yeah, so Cam and Derek both work for Praxis, which is the company Isaac Morehouse founded. And after going to lunch with them, we wandered over down the street to an ice cream shop, had an ice cream, and then we mined them for some Charleston gold.
That's a good way to put that.
Metaphors.
Yeah. We basically wanted to find out what they love about living in Charleston and why they love living in the city.
Yeah, and we're standing outside the ice cream shop right beside the main drag on Sullivans Island, so there's a bit of noise drifting past in the background.
Yeah, and you'll hear the wind and that sort of thing. Very authentic, setting the mood. So this is Derek and Cam's debut podcast appearance on The World Wanders.
So why did you move to, or what caused you to move to Charleston, Cam?
So I have now moved to Charleston twice. The first time was right in the middle of college. I decided to change colleges after my sophomore year, and I was picking between College of Charleston, which is here, and then two other schools, one down in Florida and one is in North Carolina. And I was they were all 50-50 for me when it comes to like the actual school. But when I actually visited Charleston, I kind of fell in love with it right from the beginning. And that's why I decided to move here the first time.
And the second time?
Yeah, so the second time, after I graduated college, I left Charleston and moved to Atlanta for a job with Fee. And then when I was changing over and starting to work with Praxis, I could kind of move wherever I wanted to. And, you know, when I left Charleston for the first time, I wasn't quite ready to leave, so I immediately moved back. And that was about a year ago.
That's awesome. What are some of the things that you love about living in Charleston?
Yeah, so the first thing that you notice is, you know, downtown Charleston proper. It's just really beautiful. It has this old historic feeling. It's one of the older, more preserved cities in America, and being on the coast, it just makes for a pretty wonderful aesthetic appeal to it. So downtown, it's very walkable, and you know, there's narrow streets. You could see like the city was designed in the 1700s, and not much has changed about it. The city has done a pretty good job of preserving that old feel. And then, you know, you're walking around, you have all these beautiful homes, you're right on the water, there's moss on the trees. It's just a really cool feeling. And then as I spent time here in college, and then since I've been back, probably the two things that stand out to me are the food and the people. So the people, even if you're not from here, you kind of assimilate pretty quickly. Everyone's very laid back, very nice to each other, and especially coming from New Jersey in the Northeast, that was a pretty different environment to be around.
Is that like a Southern thing or just a Charleston?
Yeah, it's totally a Southern thing, and I would say Charleston kind of takes it to another level sometimes.
Yeah. So what are some of the best things that you do here? Some of your favorite activities?
It's a lot around food, okay. For sure.
Seems like a good food culture.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So it's a really nice mix of like awesome, more fine dining, high scale restaurants. Mm-hmm. And in college, what a few of my friends would do is basically whatever our budget is for the month, we would end up spending it like in the first weekend, and just like do Charleston the way it should be done, and then just live like super poor college students the rest of the month. So, you know, you guys have a few more days here. One of my favorite restaurants is called The Grocery, and then another one that really stands out to me is Macintosh. Those are more of the high-end restaurants, there's quite a few that Charleston's, even more than that Charleston's really famous for. And there's a ton, since I've been back, there's a ton more restaurants popping up. And there's even more that, you can just get great food even if you're just on a daily lunch budget or something like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems really cool. It would be a cool experience as a college student because the college is right downtown.
Yeah.
You're not isolated from the city, stuck with whatever stuff is on campus. You can roam around.
Right. That's one thing you notice being around the school is it's not like one of those larger schools out in the Midwest or something where everyone has this total school spirit, because there's nothing else around your campus.
Yeah.
And maybe there's, we don't have large sports programs. So you don't have this kind of artificial school spirit about Charleston. The students at College of Charleston, they're really kind of just part of the city, which is really cool. And I think it's a good example, symbolically how the campus kind of blends in with the city too. The students do with the rest of the city too.
And for people who, if someone was coming to visit Charleston for a week, what do you think the top things to do are?
Yeah, so I would spend as much time downtown as possible. Honestly, my favorite thing to do in Charleston is just walk the streets downtown. Anywhere especially south of Broad, you have all these kind of old, wealthy families who made these beautiful homes, and just walking around the city is great. You can walk alongside the Battery up to Waterfront Park. It's just beautiful. And then, in addition to going to all the restaurants, going to all the bars, you have access to a couple different cool beaches. You come out to Sullivans Island, where we are, Isle of Palms, and then Folly Beach is kind of more of the surfer-esque beach out there. And then there's definitely some cool plantations to check out. And I believe there's also some more, historical things around the city that if you're into more of if you're a history buff or something.
And you can take a horse-drawn carriage ride.
Yes, you need to do that. They actually do have some really cool horse carriage tour guides that are cool because you get to learn about the history of the city. Like I said, Charleston's, it's been around for, since the 1600s or so, and a lot of the stuff that was built, in the early times, it's still around, and you get to learn about the history.
Yeah.
What do you think is it about Charleston that brings so many young, interesting people to live here?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. You have great weather here. It's, especially for people coming from the north, behind the wall.
Beyond the wall.
Beyond the wall, sorry, yes.
Winter's coming.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about winter. It's very moderate. So you get great weather here all the time. You have access to beaches, which is great. And then it's not just a beach town, though. Downtown has a lot to offer in itself. So you get a nice combination of those things.
Yeah. It seems like there's just a lot of cool people, a lot of cool restaurants, a lot of awesome stuff to do here.
Yeah, it's been fun being around for the last 3 or 4 years now, and just to see how it's changing. I heard people talking about that have been living here longer than me. It's always growing and changing, and even just my 18 months away, coming back, there was so many new restaurants. The area is just becoming more and more developed. Downtown Charleston is stretching out farther and farther north on the peninsula. Yeah. So there's definitely people are finding out about Charleston. Before it was kind of a hidden gem, and that doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Yeah, we were talking about on the way here how it's coming from Canada, we really had no idea about the Carolinas.
Yeah.
It's just not places that we thought about.
Right.
About these big cities like New York, LA, San Francisco, Austin.
Yep.
You never hear people talking about Charleston when you're up in Canada.
Yep. Yeah, there's quite a few cities as you have found out, especially in the Carolinas and in Georgia. You have Savannah, that's a few hours south of here.
Yeah.
Cool city like Asheville, that's 5 hours west or so. I had a friend who was coming over he's living here now. He was originally from England. He was just asking me okay, I know about the major cities. I know what I should do there. Mm-hmm. Where else should I hit? I was there's, you need to get to Charleston for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And Derek, you just moved here for work, but what have your first impressions been of living in South Carolina?
I like it a lot. So I'm from San Diego originally. I lived in Austin later on, and I think Charleston gives a bit of both. You certainly get some of that southern culture, but then you also get the beach town feeling that San Diego has. So I'm used to that, and I obviously I think it's very comparable to San Diego in that regard. It's a bit smaller than my taste. I think there's a little bit slower than I'm traditionally used to. But I've been getting to know the place, and basically everything that Cameron said was right. I've enjoyed getting to do some of those activities, get to explore the restaurants in the city, see things like Fort Sumter, which is pretty cool. Which is also Fort Sumter was the site of a Civil War fort. Was the site where essentially the Civil War began. So Lincoln sent troops down. And that was, I think, where the first shots of the Civil War were fired, or at least that was the first aggression in the Civil War. And it's fun to see that, both from the historical perspective, but also just because it's so small that you think it's bigger because it's the fort. But the reality is, today, a tiny little naval ship could blow it to pieces. It's like that small. It's almost underwhelming in a way. So that's very cool to see. I travel a lot, so the one thing that I think it's a blessing and a curse is the Charleston airport is very small, so you can basically just drive up and park really cheaply for daily parking, and just walk into the airport. And typically, depending on what hours you go, you can just almost walk into the gates.
That's pretty awesome.
The downside is, it's great. I mean, I love it, but the downside is there's not a lot of routes to Charleston. There's not a lot of airlines. There's not a lot of gates in general, so you almost always have to connect somewhere. And flights tend to be a bit more expensive, which is something to. I guess it's something to consider, but at the same time, there's some surprisingly awesome cheap flights as well to cool places on the East Coast, like New York City and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you think you'd miss when you're not living here anymore?
Not living in Charleston?
Yeah.
Certainly the beach and the weather. I lived in Austin for a while, which has good weather, but I personally miss the beach. I like the beach culture, which is more relaxed. I think friendlier people. And it's just like a happy place to be in general. I think just because you ride down the road in your car, windows down, there's palm trees, there's a light breeze. That is certainly really nice. And then I'd miss just the southern aesthetic kind of around here, like big droopy trees
and big old houses.
Yeah, and then colorful houses as well, pretty nice.
Yeah, those things you just don't really get, even in Austin or other places in the South. You don't really get that, and so Charleston just has that nice feeling that I haven't had before. Certainly, living in other places in the South.
Have you found that it's been pretty easy to settle into life in Charleston? I know that there's always challenges moving to a new city, meeting people. Obviously, some people for work, but have you found that it's been?
Yeah, it's very comparable to other places. There's there wasn't a whole lot of surprises or anything like that. Prices are pretty comparable to a lot of places I've lived before. And it's easy to get around. The downtown area is pretty consolidated, so it's not that difficult. There's some nice, suburbs and stuff like that. So yeah, I haven't really found it very difficult personally. I think it just feels like another place that happens to be a bit cooler than the last one I lived in.
Yeah, that's cool. And what's been your favorite activity that you've done so far? That sort of thing.
I'm going to be with Cameron. It's eating at the restaurants. It's the food. So in Austin, obviously, it's really big on barbecue, which I love. I think it's great, and there's a lot of really good places there as well. But Charleston, the Carolinas in general, have kind of their own style on barbecue. Carolina barbecue. They have the Carolina barbecue mustard sauce, which is just amazing.
Okay.
And I think getting to try all of those different things in either tacos or brisket or also different kind of compilations has been really fun. And so, yeah, that's definitely been my favorite part, I would say, and the most unique part about Charleston.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks for catching up with us, guys.
You got it.
Yeah.
It was really awesome to be able to get some local wisdom on the things to do. I think that's one of the things that you kind of struggle with as a traveler a lot of times, knowing where the best restaurants are to eat. You can rely on Yelp, but sometimes that leads you astray.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the beautiful things about services like Couchsurfing, where you can stay with somebody who's local to the city and somebody who can really give you the insider scoop on where to go, and it's not just all about the tourist stuff. So it was really cool to check in with Cam and Derek and just hear what they really love about living in Charleston.
Yeah, and we never did end up taking the horse-drawn carriage ride, but apparently it's great. So if you've been, let us know.
Yeah,
how the horse-drawn carriage ride is.
Yeah, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Ryan needs a little bit of convincing to go on it, I think.
Yeah.
He wasn't sold.
I needed some persuasion.
Yeah.
So after chatting with Derek and Cam, we went out and walked on the beach in Sullivans Island, and it was really windy.
Yeah, and I was wearing a dress, so most of the time was spent me trying not to have my dress flip up.
Yeah, and I wasn't wearing a dress that day, so I was really grateful that I didn't have to deal with that problem.
Yeah, I'm glad that you chose to wear your shorts instead of your man dress.
And one of the things that I was thinking about while we were there walking on the beach, it's really an awesome feeling to be able to walk on the beach and see ocean to the side and nothing but water. We both grew up inland, so I haven't spent a ton of time around the ocean, and the times we have spent have been tropical, basically. How much ocean time have we had in non-tropical environments?
Not too much, like
Patagonia, New Zealand,
Vancouver.
But yeah,
Seattle.
This kind of Atlantic coast where like the beach is big and wide, and there's some like grass in the wind and like this nice house, and you can just see beach as far as you can see and ocean out to the side. It gives me this feeling of like, oh wow, it's really nice to be out here walking. And it's one of those things kind of like hiking where you really enjoy it in the moment and you remember it afterwards. But then when you're thinking about going in the future, you kind of forget how much you really do enjoy walking on the beach or going for a hike in the mountains.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was really enjoyable, and because I don't get to the ocean that often, I just really, really soak up those experiences. And that was definitely a highlight of being in Charleston for the weekend.
Yeah, and I think there are a few other places around Charleston too. You don't just have to go to Sullivans Island, which is like the most popular, probably busiest place. Like there are other spots to go walk along the beach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And so we spent the rest of the afternoon wandering through downtown, walking around the streets and just kind of taking in the sights and the sounds. And then we check in a little bit later in the evening and we talk about a few things that had just been sort of going on with us as the weekend was progressing, and a few things that we were kind of observing and I guess struggling with a little bit. So something that has been pretty interesting for us since being in Charleston this weekend is just noticing kind of like how soft we've gotten in the last few years in terms of accommodations and like stamina with the days. So, arriving at this older building that's a bit grungy, smells like cigarettes and
urine,
maybe a little bit of vomit as well, and just feeling like kind of uncomfortable with it. And then we got home last night. We thought we had the apartment to ourselves for our Airbnb, and somebody was sleeping on the floor in the living room, and I know for me, I felt really uncomfortable. Like I was just like, what's going on? Like this isn't right. Like how can you rent out your bedroom and just like sleep on the living room floor and not tell your guests? Like it felt weird. And for me, I just noticed that, that's not something that would have bothered me like in the middle of a backpacking trip, or when I'd like recently traveled.
It might have been like surprising, but
like not that unusual, I guess, or maybe not as uncomfortable.
Yeah, there was like, so we got home last night, turned on the light, and we're like, oh shit, there's like someone sleeping on the floor in the living room. And then, so we're in a one-bedroom apartment, so it's kind of surprising, because originally we were like, oh, we must have the whole place to ourselves. But there was kind of this moment where we're sitting in the room, it's kind of like a grungy building, grungy apartment, it's just a mattress on the floor, and we're like, oh, should we book a different place for tomorrow night? Thinking about like, quitting and just being like, okay, we need something nicer than this. And I think that was really a reminder to me to be like, okay, wow, like this is actually like pretty nice compared to a lot of places we stayed at traveling. And it's this feeling of like, oh wow, I can't deal with this. I need something nicer. Like this isn't comfortable enough.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, also like, I was unpacking my bag and you're like, oh, like, make sure you put your stuff away. Like, there might be bugs and stuff. And, you know, we've been through so many different places with so many more bugs than there would be in South Carolina. And just this reminder of, like, yeah, really being comfortable within our own setting. And it's also this reminder to, I think, appreciate where we do live, appreciate what we do have. I think is something for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we have a pretty nice apartment in Atlanta. I mean, it's nothing special. It's kind of like square without much light, but it is nice relative to so many places. I think one of the things that's amazing about travel is, like, you learn to live with so much less than you have at home, and you realize you don't really need all these things, but you get accustomed to them. And so for us, living in Canmore for 15 months, moving down to Atlanta, we've been staying in nice places, and it does just become like same old. So I can look at our apartment and think, wow, this isn't that nice. But coming here and staying in a bit of a grungier Airbnb has been a good experience to be like, oh, I'm looking forward to going back to our apartment.
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely had conversations with friends before where they're just like, oh, I'm just, like, very much a homebody. Like, I like to be home in my own space, in my own bed. And I've always kind of been like, you know, like, I kind of whatever. But I have noticed on this, like, weekend getaway, and even a few other, like, trips that I've taken just short since being down here, but more with this one, that it's like I've really, you know, I'm kind of like, okay, like, ready to go home to my comfortable space. Something else that I observed today was just this, like, you know, we're walking around a lot. At one point I was really hungry and I got really grumpy because I needed some food, and it was this frustration that I haven't really felt in a long time. I just felt like this, like, almost like a weakness. Like, I was like, oh, it's like my stamina is weak. Do you know what I mean?
Like, you've grown so accustomed to having snacks when you want them, like never having this, like, oh, I haven't had anything for quite a while because I haven't found anything work good, and now I've got to find somewhere to eat, and it's not just like, oh, I can eat at 4 o'clock every single day because I have that stuff in my fridge.
Yeah, and also not knowing where the grocery stores are, where it's going to be, like, easy to find food, and then I get a little stressed. And it's also, like, you know, just walking all day was this, like, wow, I'm, like, actually really tired.
Yeah, and just to give you guys an idea of our setting, we're sitting on the stairs in front of the market on Market Street in Charleston, which is one of the busier streets. There's a lot of bars around, so there's people going by, and you heard a car with some music blaring going by as well.
Yeah, I think there's a party bus that I can see right now. Apparently it's like some fraternities formal. So there's been a lot of parties happening today, and a lot of girls not wearing very much clothing, and a lot of just, like, general debauchery for younger people. It's been kind of an interesting and overwhelming experience. I think that's something that's been kind of on my radar this weekend, is how, like, overwhelmed I feel by all the people and the noise and the music and the traffic, and it's just like, whoa, there's a lot going on.
Something that we were both kind of experiencing while we were in Charleston was reconnecting with a lot of travel feelings. So excitement about being somewhere new, of course, but then also kind of a bit of overwhelm from walking around a city, not having regular recurring meals, having this, like, oh, we want to eat somewhere, where do you want to eat, making that decision, walking around, all those things, I think, both kind of brought us back to a lot of travel memories.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like it kind of took me back to the last time we did a big backpacking trip, which has been it's been a little while now, and it made me both excited and a little bit anxious for what the future holds for us, just based on feeling overwhelmed by, like, a dirty Airbnb place.
We're getting old.
And feeling tired from walking around a city. And
I think the thing that struck my mind was that it's really nice to be on a long trip, because you have these opportunities to have a day where it's not perfect, and then you're like, whatever, figure it out tomorrow. Like, not really worried about it. But when you only have really one entire day to do something, you feel like, we've got to go do it.
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
You can sort of feel disappointed if you're like, oh, I feel really tired. Really, what I feel like doing right now is like sitting down or going having a nap. But you feel like you need to explore everything.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I feel like that's exactly how I was feeling on the Saturday afternoon in Charleston, was just like so tired, really just wanting to eat some food and then lie down and just have some Amanda time. And then I was torn because, you know, I might never go to Charleston again. So
we'll be back.
Yeah, so I really wanted to take in the sights, but it's hard to take in the sights and the sounds, and you're overwhelmed and tired, and for me, hungry.
Absolutely.
And so we finished off the night on the stairs right where we were talking.
Well, we didn't sleep there.
No, okay. So we made our way back to our Airbnb. Slept on our mattress on the ground. And then we made our way to Hominy Grill for breakfast the following morning, where we'll take you now. So Hominy Grill is pretty much amazing.
Yeah, both times we went to Charleston, we did Sunday morning breakfast at Hominy Grill, and both times quite a substantial wait.
Yes, but totally worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like almost like the one thing you need to do if you go there.
Yeah.
Food-wise. You probably need to walk along the ocean, maybe go to Sullivans Island.
See King Street. Yeah, there's lots of things you should do. But in terms of breakfast restaurants, I think Hominy Grill is one of the top rated, if not the top rated restaurant on Yelp. And it's definitely worth the wait. It's definitely worth the walk if you're not close to it, the drive, if you're staying across the bridge or something like that. And I've had really good omelets from there. Ryan had, what's it called? The Big Nasty?
The nasty biscuit.
Yeah. And is there anything nasty about that?
Well, it's delicious. The
What is
desire to nap afterwards is intense.
Yeah. What is it? Can you tell me a bit about
It
that?
was fried chicken with gravy on a biscuit. There's something else on there too. Maybe bacon? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there might have been bacon. Looked pretty mean and hearty.
Yeah, but something that I love about breakfast in the South is these delicious, puffy biscuits that you get with everything.
That make your body delicious and puffy.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's somewhere that does gluten-free biscuits for breakfast.
Yeah, so I think if you guys have been following the podcast for a while, you might know that I'm gluten-free, not by choice. And so I have not had the chance to indulge in the delicious, fluffy biscuits thus far in the U.S. I tasted a bit of Ryan's, though, just a smidgen, and it's pretty yum. Mm-hmm. Gluten-free ones just wouldn't be as good. It's just how it goes, but that's fine. And then from Hominy, we made our way to Magnolia Plantation, which was Ryan's first plantation experience since being in the South. What was that like for you?
It was pleasant. A nice place, beautiful trees, flowers.
Yeah, and something that was interesting about Magnolia Plantation is that you can pay like a general fee to just get in, and then there's all these additional fees if you want to do like this boat tour, the swamp tour, tours of the slaves' cabins, tours of the house. And we hadn't really known that beforehand, and all the tours were booked out for many hours in advance, and we wanted to get back to Atlanta at a reasonable time, so we ended up just getting the general entry. So you don't really learn as much with that. It was still interesting to walk around. There was some signage that we could read. We got like kind of a feel for what the plantation was like.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a bummer not to be able to go on a tour and learn more about the history of it.
Yeah, for sure.
But still a very nice place.
Yeah, I would recommend visiting Magnolia Plantation, if not a plantation. I think that I've visited 4 now since my time in the U.S. One in Louisiana, Georgia, Tennessee, and now
What is it
Carolina.
about plantations that has interested you?
I think it's the history. The history is really fascinating to me, learning about like the Civil War, the time where people kept slaves, which is something I've never been really introduced to in my entire life outside of fictional novels.
Yeah, and as Canadians, like we get kind of like a passing look at American history throughout school, but not really much. It's like, oh yeah, this was happening, basically. You don't dive deep into it. So it is kind of like an emblem of like Southern history. So it is kind of culturally distinct from what we grew up with, and something that's more interesting about being down here in the South.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something, especially as I get older and wiser, that I really appreciate about traveling anywhere is learning about the local history. It's just something that I have a lot more fascination in than I used to when I was younger, and I just traveled places to, you know, get a feel for the nightlife, or, you know, just for the food, or to meet people. I think history is really something that intrigues me, that I want to learn about when I visit somewhere.
Absolutely.
And so what were your overall thoughts about the weekend in Charleston?
So every time we go and do a weekend trip, I get this feeling like we should really go do that more often. I think that it's really nice to get out of the city you're living in, to get somewhere new. Kind of gives you like a new mental frame of mind when you go outside the city, especially going to the ocean, being able to check that out, meet with some new people. It's easy to get kind of like stuck in a groove in a city and like, oh, the weekend comes around, I got stuff to do. But yeah, just the importance of making time for yourself to get out and do something and go to a new city, even if it's one you've been to before.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something we talk a lot about on the podcast, is how routine can be really like lethal, really dangerous. And, you know, if you're in a position where you can't really travel longer term, or you only get a couple weeks vacation, remember that your backyard can be really cool regardless of where you are in the world, and that you can take these mini vacations and they can be really fun and inspiring and fulfilling.
Yeah. And it's one of the amazing things about the States compared to Canada. If you drew a circle from Calgary of like an 8-hour drive, I think the only thing in that circle is like, city-wise, is like Edmonton,
Jasper, Banff,
Lethbridge.
Canmore.
So there's some nice places. But yeah, but anyways.
Get out of here.
Stop taking away from my point. Anyways, my point was that there is so much cool stuff to do in the States. I think
that's a big generalization, though, because I drove through eastern Montana and I drove through all of South Dakota, and you could argue the same thing that you just argued with Alberta for South Dakota, I think.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. If on like the East Coast here, like near Atlanta, like you can get to Charleston, Savannah, Asheville, Nashville,
Memphis,
Birmingham.
Knoxville.
You can go to Florida. Like there's all these cool
Auburn.
places, and this isn't even compared to like the Northeast, where you've got like Philly, Washington, New York, etc. Really cool places to go for the weekend. And it's funny, we've kind of made a point of going to some new cities, you more so than I have. But even like talking to people who live here in Atlanta, have lived here their entire lives, haven't been to Charleston. It's funny how, and I know the same thing applied to us when we were living in Alberta. A friend would come from Australia and be like, oh yeah, I went like here. Or when we were living in Banff, for example, Lake Minnewanka is like one of the big tourist attractions. I've never seen it. It's like 10 minutes from town.
Dude, I biked to Lake Minnewanka. That's so shameful.
Yeah, so getting in the traveler mindset when you're not traveling.
For sure, yeah. I think that's a big takeaway from the weekend. Talk to locals as much as you can. If you can go on a weekend trip and just find somebody who lives there and chat with them about what they love most, that's a pretty awesome experience.
Mm-hmm. And then a big takeaway for me was not taking for granted nice things, and appreciating how discomfort can add to your life. Like going and staying in a place that's not that nice actually improved my life, because it makes me appreciate the nice things that I have.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with that. So following our visit to Magnolia Plantation, which is about 30 minutes from downtown Charleston, we continued on our way back to Atlanta, which was about 4.5 hours from there. And that's where our story ends for this episode.
As always, thanks for listening. And this is a little bit of an experimental episode for us, and we'd love to hear what you guys think of it. If you really enjoyed any part of it, maybe you didn't enjoy part of it, definitely fire us an email and let us know.
Yeah, info@theworldwanderers.com. As always, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.